Paperback Rocker, episode 94. Hey, this is Matt Severson, the Paperback Rocker, and I'm broadcasting from my 6x9 foot cinder block shack in the desert of northern Mexico, southern Texas. Welcome and thanks for checking out my show.
Great supine protoplasmic invertebrate jellies.
When he was young, his mother told him he could be anything. He said, "I want to be a podcaster, Mommy."
Hey everybody, what's up? It's your old friend Matt, that Paperback Rocker from paperbackrocker.com, my website. Go check it out sometime. There's lots of stuff on there. There's a bio to read. There are links to my books and my music and things about guitar lessons. You name it. I do a lot of different things, all artistic for the most part. And today's artistic endeavor will be this podcast, which will be episode 94 as we creep ever closer to that century mark, that special mark of 100 episodes and the accompanying celebration, gifts, red carpet outside my 6x9 foot cinder block shack somewhere in the desert. If I do reveal the location to my many fans, maybe I'll have an internet contest where you have to use GPS tracking or some geolocating to the person closest to the coordinates of my 6x9 cinder block shack will win some kind of prize. Maybe. But we still have 5 more episodes or 6 after this one. And this is volume 38 of the Blue Whiskey audiobook read by me, Matt Severson, the author of said book, which I hold in my hand right now. And we are on page 210. When we last read, our hero, Stanton Wheelhouse, had just introduced Bob Dylan to a person who would be special in everyone's life, Edie Sedgwick, and she had fallen into the clutches of the infamous factory, Warhol's production studio. And so that's where we are right now. And we're on page 210. And I'll just read one paragraph from the end to reintroduce us into the scene. I introduced Bob Dylan to Edie in December of that traumatic year. Edie and I were drinking in the upstairs bar at the Kettle of Fish on McDougal Street, and she was upset, talking about Minty. Bob came in with a man I had yet to meet, a folk musician from Cambridge named Bob Newworth. Newworth and Edie recognized each other, so we all sat together and conversed, puffing cigarettes like smokestacks, thanks to the omnipresent black beauties. Sometime after that initial encounter, Dylan learned of the crush Edie had on him, which caused him to become infatuated with her in return, but their love was never requited. Eventually, Newworth and Edie became lovers, but in the end, he couldn't put up with her drug abuse. After Edie got mixed up with Warhol, she was forever an addict, and many, including Dylan, blamed Warhol, but I didn't. People make their own choices. Dylan referenced both Edie and Andy in songs on Blonde, which came out in '66. Edie's picture was supposedly among others on the inner sleeve, but I don't think so. Edie was a blonde and thin as a stiletto heel, and the partially obscured girl in the picture is neither. That chance meeting at the Kettle of Fish reunited me and Bobby for the first time since my return to New York. By now, Dylan was the big fish, the whale in the small pond of Greenwich Village. He was no longer threatened by me, and we had a lively discussion. There's one other thing I need to mention about that chance meeting. I'll admit I was drunk at the time and speeding out of my mind, but I suggested to Dylan that it was high time we plugged our guitars in and played electric. I railed that we were being drowned out by the Beatles. I must have made a convincing argument because Bobby took my advice. He started secretly rehearsing with an electric backing band, and in March of '65, he released an album called Bringing It All Back Home. The first side was electric, and to further challenge or alienate his fan base, the album had no protest songs. When I heard it, I called Bob and told him I thought it was his finest work yet. He appreciated my show of support, so he invited me on a second trip to England. We talked frequently on the tour, and the main topic was his reticence to playing live with his electric band. I assured him that he was beloved by his fans and any artistic direction he went in would be embraced. By that time, I was limiting my shows to Fridays and Saturdays, along with occasional midweek gigs at Hardware to help out Ben and Ruben. I was guarding against overexposure. I was a mid-sized fish now, a speckled trout, I'd say. The 1965 trek to London was documented in the film Don't Look Back, and the movie accurately portrays the Bob Dylan zeitgeist. I was there the whole time, but spent most of the movie obscured in a cloud of amphetamine-fueled cigarette smoke. I have never been credited as being present, but my voice can be heard chattering away in the background a few times. Baez got a ton of FaceTime. Watching the movie now, I thank the heavens I wasn't pictured. Dylan comes across as an argumentative, egotistical sprig, and Baez is insufferable with her constant singing and banana eating. I'm sure I was as obnoxious as they were. Humility was lacking in our group since Bob's aura made us feel like he was Jesus and we were the apostles. People worshiped the guy, for God's sake. I couldn't have been more wrong when I insisted to Bob that his fans would embrace him playing electric. On July 24th, 1965, Bob played an acoustic set at a folk singer's workshop at the Newport Folk Festival in Rhode Island and was well received for the third year in a row. I sucked down a couple quick bottles of wine while he played and got wickedly drunk. Black Beauties would have kept me sober, but I had given my last dozen or so to Bob. I lambasted Dylan after his set, proclaiming that his fans were mindless sycophants and demanded that he challenge them. I passed out for the night, but Bob didn't. He hurriedly assembled the band from his new record and rehearsed through the night. The next evening wasn't a workshop. It was the legendary Newport Folk Festival. Bob played in front of an audience for the first time using amplified instruments. He was booed. That was the last I saw of my friend, Bob Dylan. One last thing regarding Bob. I'm going to set the record straight about something for once and for all. Bob Dylan did not turn the Beatles on to marijuana. I did. It was at the Delmonico Hotel on August 28, 1964. I wasn't famous yet, so I might as well have been a room service waiter in the memory of history, but I was there as a guest of Bob, and I had the marijuana that he so generously volunteered to the Beatles. It was me who made Sgt. Pepper's and Abbey Road possible. And yes, my tongue is firmly present in my cheek once again about those Beatles albums, not the marijuana. Okay, now we hit chapter 18 here. And we begin the descent, possibly, the dissension part of the rise and fall of Stanton Wheelhouse. Let's see here. Chapter 18 on page 214. Get a drink of coffee here. Lucy's stirring. I was at an artistic peak through this period around 1965. I wrote hundreds of songs I would fall back on for decades. Musically, I was like an athlete ready to compete in the Olympic decathlon. The only problem was that my career was non-existent, at least when compared to you-know-whos. Ben had not performed any managerial duties since my return with Reuben. We remained best of friends, but I think he took my breaking away as a message that I wanted to be free. I don't recall if I wanted that or not, but as he has reminded me many times, actions speak louder than words. He occupied himself with the transformation of the store into nightclub, and I booked my own shows. I was like a rudderless ship through that period with Edie and Bob. It was a heady time, and I'm thankful my only commitments were my weekend shows and my occasional duties to Dylan. It allowed me to be a true free spirit. Few people are ever afforded that luxury. As I examine the past, I think I understand why no managers or agents approached me. I was like a fish flopping on a slimy boat deck. They either thought they couldn't wrap their hands around me and hold on, or they were too disgusted to try. Also, since I was opening up for Dylan and hanging around him, I think most of them thought I was spoken for, or they may not have noticed me in Dylan's shadow. Another thing which is crucial to understanding Stanton Wheelhouse III, if you will permit me to refer to myself in the third person, is that I hate relinquishing control of my art and my fate and my success or my failure. It wasn't an issue in the early days with Ben. He was like a loyal Cocker Spaniel compared to the typical music biz types I would encounter after my second tour in the village. I know I borrowed a term of war there, and most of the times that would be disgraceful, but the music business can legitimately be called a war of sorts. I think I inherited the need for absolute control from my father. He never allowed his literary work to be touched by an editor. He had what are now called beta readers, but what he called his inner circle, who were people he respected, and their input was always welcome. I take that back almost as quickly as I type it. He didn't want input. He wanted to know if they saw value in the work. He didn't care if they liked it, only if they thought there was value in it. In his mind, that clarified opinions between the emotional and the intellectual. He was only concerned with the latter. If someone responded that they saw no merit in his work, my father dismissed them, both as friend and member of the inner circle. My father didn't just think he was right, he knew it, and he always was. And the beta readers who lasted were those who started their feedback with sentences like, "It has great intellectual merit, but these are the typographical errors I noted," followed by a list of errata that never offended my father. He wanted desperately to find and eliminate any mistake in presentation, but not in premise. He was smarter than his inner circle, but he respected them far more than his critics. He was smarter than the critics, too. I never took it as far as my father, but the opinions of critics have meant less and less to me over the years. I always cared about my fans, though, and hold them in the highest esteem. My fans are the equivalent of my father's inner circle. That being said, I never let my audience dictate to me the type of music I made. I challenged them many times along the way as different styles and genres found my interest. David Bowie has been quoted as saying I influenced him in that regard, and he approaches making music the same as I have. Thank you, David. My sister is no different than me or my father with her photography and films. Confidence runs in the family, but don't confuse that with ego. My father instilled in both of us the notion that you don't do something unless you're going to do it well, bordering on all-consuming obsession. Not that any of us ever expect our output to be universally loved or even understood. We know the subjective nature of taste very well. That's why we don't get our feelings hurt by the words of critics. It's the Wheelhouse way. Back in the village, I sailed along rudderless, as I said, garnering respect from the people I played for and from the musicians I met, but I couldn't build any of that zeitgeist like Dylan. I've always been of the mind that if I just do what I'm supposed to do, things will work out. So that's what I did for an entire year. At some point, the potential managers finally came calling. and they were something else. They fancied themselves Svengalis who would lead the innocent and naive Stanton Wilhouse III to the platinum promised land for a small cut of 25%. 25% off the top, mind you, not from the profit. Their business model would have them living high on the hog while I slept in the sty. And to all of them, I said no. Okay, that's going to be where we're going to stop for now. And that would be on page 216 towards the top. I hope you're enjoying this epic saga of Stanton Wilhouse III. And think about getting it as a Christmas present for someone you love. I'm sure they would enjoy it. And if you like the novel and have read it, or if you just like it, go on Amazon and leave a review for me. It really helps. Well, I'll see y'all soon with another volume. And that will be volume 39 of the Blue Whiskey novel. Have a great week until I see you again. Stay positive and enjoy your life.
The Paperback Rocker has signed off.